So, okay, since we're on the topic of leg injuries, I actually want to talk about leg locks.
Okay. Yeah.
So one, for people who don't know, maybe explain what they are, but two, like as a white belt who like, we don't train a ton of leg locks. Like, they absolutely terrify me because I hear about like heel hooks, especially like the injury.
Sure.
Maybe explain like what they are. Do you think the amount of injuries people can get from leg locks are exaggerated? And like, what's actually happening? Because like, when I see a heel hook, I'll have to like flash a picture of one up on the screen or something, but it doesn't look like, when I see an arm bar, it's like somebody's elbow beam. Like, I can tell how that's going to break somebody's arm. When I see a heel hook, I'm like, and they're like, be really careful with this. I'm like, what? Like, what are you even doing that's like tearing or breaking? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. So generally, leg locks are just attacks at all the lower body joints. You can attack the knee in multiple directions. You can attack the ankle, and that's generally you can attack. So yeah, there's something called a calf slicer, or a calf cutter, where you can attack the backside of the knee, the connective tissue there. And so what you're looking to do is essentially use torque and different positionings and anchor points to twist and bend and
break.
Hyperextend essentially the joints in the wrong direction. And so there's different types of leg locks, and so like when you mention heel hooks, that's generally considered the scariest one, and it is. And so the kind of the misunderstanding a lot of lay people have when they see a heel hook is they think because you're hooking the foot, they think it's an attack on the lower part of the leg,
right?
The ankle,
but it's the knee, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so essentially what you're doing is you are not only immobilizing the leg at the adjacent joints, at the hip and at the knee, but you're creating counter rotation. And so when you hook the heel, and generally you're going to want to hook it at your wrist bone, and you're basically going to, now where people go wrong is there's not really much of a twisting action. It's more of a rotating action that you're creating with the toes in the armpit and sort of a bicep curl. And then at the same time, so let's say you're doing, and there's different heel hooks, inside heel hooks or inverted heel hooks, and then outside heel hooks. And so basically you're rotating the knee either internally or externally.
So is it a twisting that you're doing?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was like a pulling apart.
Yeah, and the best way you can think about it is like, for me, is wringing out a towel. So you're kind of twisting in both directions. Because that's where they just assume a lot of times when they see the heel hook is that you're just rotating in one direction, but you're maybe creating a wall the other direction, so they can't continue to rotate at the adjacent joints. But you're also creating counter rotation with your hips and with your movement. So while maybe I'm trying to pull the heel to the left, essentially, I'm also rotating my hips to the right. And so I'm creating that counter rotation, and that's going to put all sorts of torquing pressure on the joints of the knee. So you're attacking all those ligaments, ACL, PCL, MCL, LCL.
Just all the good stuff. Yeah.
So it is
like, it hurts me to think about.
Yeah. And the scariest part about heel hooks in general for me, and so I think I have a pretty good general understanding of functional anatomy. I've been a personal trainer for 12 years, and so it's I kind of dive into it a little bit. Yeah, is with the knee joints, especially rotationally, because most people think when you think the knee that it's some people call it a dumb joint because for the most part it flexes and extends, it bends and it straightens. But it also has a little bit of rotation. Slight, and you can train that a little bit.
And it's not a ball joint like the shoulder, or your wrist.
Or the hip,
yeah.
And so when you start talking about rotating the knee, there is a little bit of movement there where you can rotate the tibia on the femur,
but it doesn't take much.
No. And so especially when you like inside heel hook, where you're basically rotating the foot from the inside out.
Yeah. And there's not a lot of pain, is what I've heard. Like, it's just kind of like a Kimura or something. You can feel the ligaments start to pull, and there's some leeway there.
Yeah, it's really the range of motion, and that's the scariest part. And so, because like with a shoulder, with a Kimura lock, let's say, you're gonna have a good bit of time because of the distance that the joint has to travel to meet the range.
That makes sense.
Whereas the knee, the nature of the position itself of an inside heel hook is you're already at end range, and so
doesn't take much.
The number of degrees of rotation that it takes to create a break is very small.
Okay.
And so and people just generally, they're newer to the mainstream game. They were kind of frowned upon. You can't do heel hooks in the gi, especially.
Really?
Yeah. And so even now, like black belt, there's no heel hooks
in like tournaments and stuff.
Correct. Yeah, and most classes aren't going to allow any sort of heel hooks or anything in the gi, and mostly that's because of the friction that you get from the pants. The ability to escape goes way down,
right?
Because of that. And so they can be scary. That's, you know, I think too, one of my little theories is that the distance of the joint from, you know, your focus, your brain, it plays into it as well.
What do you mean by that?
So like the leg's pretty far away, right? And so if you're weight at my legs, like if you're at my arm, my shoulder, it's right here. And so for me, it's when I've been put into leg locks and stuff, you're just the ability to kind of like sense danger.
Yeah.
Distally, like further away, I think is.
Yeah. I get that. I like immediately tap to leg locks because I'm just like, I don't, and you've taught us some escapes, and I'll kind of try to like stand up but it's like, I'm not gonna bust my knee up over this. Yeah. And I always worry about like a white belt, you know, who's like trying to do one and like tearing something on accident. So I usually tap to him pretty quick. In terms of Nogi, like, are guys doing those? Like, do you think guys should be doing them in the gym or like, because I've heard you say like, if you get somebody, if there's a heel, like, what'd you say? Like a fish that you caught, like look at, catch and release, like see, like make eye contact. I could get you in a heel hook and let's just call it a day.
Yeah, it's for most people that are trained that aren't looking to compete at a high level in Nogi, that's the best way to train them. I think it's safe, and so essentially you're never finishing the technique. You're catching it. You know, you might give it a little bit of, but you're not actually looking for a tap.
Yeah,
because that takes a lot of trust in your training partner to actually know what's going on.
Yeah,
to tap correctly. You know, and we can get into hand fighting and stuff too, and how that can actually be detrimental in terms of tapping.
Hand fighting in terms of like trying to get their hooking arm like away from the heel.
For most of these techniques, you know, your training partner is going to want to be able to connect their hands, be able to finish to create a closed loop essentially, and so a big part of a lot of people's leg lock defense is to fight the hands, so they can't connect their hands. If you can't grab, then they'll have trouble finishing. It's not a surefire way. There's still ways to finish it with one arm,
right? But
a lot of times, what happens when people are hand fighting,
they're moving and twerking.
Yeah, your hands are occupied.
Yeah.
And so they're on your opponent's hand. So let's say that your training partner connects their hands finally, but you still have your hands on their arms. And they're already cranking on it. And the only thing keeping them from finishing it is you holding their hands. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're even putting extra force to try to get the tap. But you're like, okay, it's time to tap now. What do? You release your grip on their arms. Yep.
And then they pop it.
Yeah, that's why I learned this from somebody else a long time ago, is use your voice to tap to leg locks, especially when you're hand fighting. Just say tap, 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 tap. Yell it, scream it.
Yeah.
But don't let go.
Yeah.
So that's
what like belt or what level do you start teaching heel hooks to guys, or when should they start? Or leg locks in general, because there's tons of joint locks from the legs, right? It's not just heel hooks, but I guess I feel like we've learned entries into leg locks, but not a lot of the finishes.
Yeah, most of the time, you know, I mostly teach a fundamentals Nogi class, and so I definitely, leg locks are a big part of the game, especially in Nogi, and so you know, even in fundamentals, we're going to focus on those, focus on defense and offensive maneuvers and entries. That's going to be a big part. And our focus mostly with submissions in a fundamentals class is going to be more of a straight leg attack. Straight ankle locks is generally the only allowable leg lock at the lower levels.
Right.
And so big focus on that. And those are directly related to heel hooks. There's slight, changes.
It doesn't look dissimilar when you,
Yeah, and it's funny because you can use the other one as a countermeasure to a defense. And so the defense for a straight ankle lock is what we call, at least an initial defensive maneuver, is to put the boot on, which is essentially to dorsiflex your ankle or to pull your toes back towards your shin. And so a lot of times, because what they're trying to do in a straight ankle lock is overstretched.
And then that makes your heel exposed. Right.
And so that's where people will, when you put that boot on to try to defend the ankle, you create a nice fat heel to hook from there.
Yeah.
So then counter to that, you're pointing the toes to make a smaller surface area for your training partner to hook the heel. And
Gotcha.
So what you defend one, they can attack the other. And it's just,